So, welcome back everyone to day number 3. And we're camping in the most beautiful spot. Everything's going amazingly, but things are about to take a turn for the worse. Now this all starts at 6 a.m, which is a bit earlier than I would have hoped, when we're woken up by someone beeping their horn in a sort of rhythmic fashion while speeding past our campsite at the side of the road. And I no doubt think that this was a van driver from one of the local villages who was fed up with all these pesky city folk turning up and camping at the side of his commute. But anyway, we went back to bed and woke up about 11, very leisurely, because I think we're just very tired. You know, the driving's catching up to us. So we thought we'll have quite a leisurely day. And then we set off in very good spirits. Again, we rejoin the main road and we're tracing our steps back to Pool. There we get our fish and chips for sort of breakfast/dinner. It's meant to be the nicest fish and chips in the world, and to be honest, I'm not going to argue with that. It was delicious. Then we carried on, and we finally leave the bit of road that we'd done 2 days prior, and there's one amazing tourist attraction right here, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce, but it's basically this huge gorge, absolutely crazy. There's no way you can really comprehend it until you see it for yourself. That's definitely the best tourist attraction on the NC500 without doubt. Then we continue on down some nice coast road, and this is where things start to go south. So basically, we're driving up this hill, and the car starts to make an alarming squeaking noise, which is clearly coming from the engine. So we're driving up the hill, and I say to Jamie, who's driving at the time, right, we're going to pull over here in this sort of side road, and we're going to see what's wrong with the car. But just as we approach the junction, the squeaking stops. So I call it, and I'm just like, let's just keep going, you know? God is looking out for us, and we're not going to break down today. Or so we thought. So we carried on. And this is where Jamie performs, let's just say, a slightly dodgy overtake. Was I scared for my life? Maybe a little bit. But anyway, this overtake does not please the 2 cars that he passed, and the van that he sort of cut in front of, in a way. She was not very happy, the driver. She beeped her horn and sort of gave us a disapproving look. But anyway, we eventually passed the caravan, so it was all worth it in the end. But then the car starts to make another squeaking noise. So we get into Gairloch and we see this petrol station, and I think, right, let's pull over at the petrol station. There'll be a garage nearby, and let's sort it. So I pull over, and then the woman that's driving the van, she pulls into the petrol station, and she gets out and starts having a go at me, the passenger. Even though she can clearly see Jamie sat in the driver's seat. She says, oh, you can't drive like that, you're going to get yourself killed. And then another bloke who got overtaken by us also joins in, and I say to them, guys, I'm on your side here, but I wasn't driving, have a go at him. But they weren't having any of it. Anyway, I opened the bonnet once they've stopped harassing me, and I noticed that the engine belt tensioner has essentially fallen off and is hanging by one bolt. So the other bolt had sheared. And if you remember back to the first day when I mentioned that I've replaced the engine belt as maintenance to make the car more reliable, basically when I put the tensioner back on, I must have just either done a crap job, or maybe it was just bad luck down to the bolts being old. And me removing it and rescrewing it back in had caused it to snap. So basically this terrible incident with the engine had been caused by me. If I'd just left it, we might have been all right. But anyway, at this point we know that the car's not safe to drive, because if the belt snaps or just falls off, comes loose, the oil pump will stop working, the water pump might run off it as well. The engine might either overheat or it will just blow up altogether if the oil stops circulating. So up the hill from this petrol station, there is actually a garage. So I walked up into the reception to see if they could help. And who was there but the van lady? So actually, I thought she was going to give me more abuse, but she actually seemed to sort of warm to me a bit when she realised that I was actually just a polite young man who had broken down. But the lady at the garage, who was at the reception, she just said that we'd have to wait till like 3 nights or something, which wasn't feasible. And then the van driver, she did make a slightly sarcastic remark saying like something along the lines of, if you'd driven carefully, this wouldn't have happened. But that's bollocks, it would have happened anyway, you know. So we get back in the car, and I see that there's a hardware shop down the road. I think I might have asked the lady at the petrol station shop actually, if there was a hardware store nearby. Because I figured that if we could buy a clamp, we could maybe clamp this tensioner back to the engine block and carry on a bit longer. So we drove just down the road to this hardware store, which I think it's down here. Yeah, this exact building right there. That was run by a lovely Scottish couple, and they helped us out. We even showed them the engine. They let us buy one of the clamps, and they also gave us a great bit of information. They told us that if we carried on for about half an hour, we would come across a house with a lot of old cars and boats in the front yard, and that belonged to a mechanic who could potentially fix the car for us. So this is our only hope. So we press on. The engine's squeaking intermittently. It'll squeak for a bit, it'll stop, it'll squeak for a bit, it'll stop. And we press on for another half hour until we arrive at what we assume is the mechanic's house. Now this house is sort of in a complex of 2 buildings. There's a little cottage at the front, and then the mechanic's house is in the yard at the back. So when we pull in, we're greeted by an old man who emerges from like the annex of this cottage, and he says that his name is Doug, and he tells us that the mechanic won't be back for a few hours, but he should be able to help us. And in the meantime, he offered to host us in the front garden of his house, which actually turned out to be an Airbnb. And he even said that we can use the bathroom of the house. So he left it unlocked for us that night so we could go in and use the toilet, which is just amazing. It's incredible how nice people are. He actually said that the reason he decided to help us was because when he was in the war, his motorbike broke down in the desert and someone saved him. So he thought that he'd return the favour by saving us, which is very philosophical indeed. So we waited for the mechanic to return, and when he did return, he was a very quiet man. He was a man of few words. He was English, actually, and so was Doug, surprisingly. So 2 Englishmen. I guess they were just helping out their fellow English friends. But the mechanic looked, and he was like, his first reaction was, "Holy shit, how has the car made it here?" He didn't say that. We could tell he was thinking it. But he said, "Just leave it with him and he'll see what he can do." So we went and put up our tents in the front garden, had some food, and it was about 4:30 in the afternoon at this point, so approaching the evening. And we had a lot of beers with us, so we just thought we'd go down to the loch on the shores, take some camp chairs, take some wood, start a fire, and we'd just get drunk. So that's exactly what we did. So drank a bit, and then we ran out of beer, we ran out of firewood. So we walked back down this quite fast road, actually, which is maybe a bit dangerous, but it wasn't busy. So we went back. This was about 7 or 8 in the evening. And I look at the car and I can see that he's actually working on it. He's brought it into his yacht, into his big sort of shed warehouse complex, and he's working on the car. He's looking at it. So that filled me with a lot of hope. And then we gathered more supplies, went back to the lake, and we got quite drunk that night, actually. We were being very philosophical, thinking a lot about karma, if we even deserved to have these nice deeds carried out for us. We were thinking a lot about the lady in the van, about how annoyed she'd feel about if she knew how nice things had actually turned out for us. Obviously, at this point, we don't know that the car's actually going to be all right, but we're very hopeful. So we return to find some shortbreads that had been made by the wife of the mechanic that had been left outside our tent. So again, we're flabbergasted by how nice everyone's been to us. Like, do we even deserve this? Very, very philosophical stuff. We went to bed and we woke up fairly early the next morning. I think I set an alarm just to see how the car was doing. And yeah, the car was fixed. It was a miracle. It was one of the best feelings I've ever had. So I went back to Jamie, told him good news. We paid the mechanic for his work. I gave Doug some beers just to say thank you for hosting us on his front garden. And yeah, we pressed on. It's now the morning of day 4, after 3 or 4 nights, whichever way you look at it. Been on the road for a long time now, but we're feeling very elated and very philosophical about the true kindness that we witnessed from multiple people the night before. But we pressed on towards what's well known as one of the most dangerous roads in the whole of the UK. Now, I had actually done this road before in my Mini last year, so it wasn't completely new to me. But I was slightly concerned about how the old Honda would handle this famous mountain path, which is known as the Bar or Applecross Pass. The mechanic actually did warn us about doing this in the car. He said, guys, just be careful. It's a very old car. It's a bit rusty, take it easy. But we chose not to listen to him. So we carried on through some beautiful scenery, which I should probably just stop saying that because it's kind of obvious at this point. But this section of coast road here is extremely beautiful. If I had to pick one sort of hour-long stretch of road to be my favourite, it would be the section you're looking at right now. It's truly amazing. Now, at this point, there's something I need to add, because I completely forgot about it, and I've just noticed it in the edit. But throughout the first video, and even the first half of this, I kept mentioning about how the car is juddering really violently every time I set off from a stop in first gear. Now, obviously, I mentioned that I thought this was the clutch, but actually, as soon as the repair had been done to the serpentine belt tensioner, everything was fine. So essentially, this car had been shaking violently because the belt on the engine was loose. And this has been happening since Inverness. And we've probably covered about 400 or so miles since then. So yeah, I thought that was worth mentioning. So we get into Applecross. I think we had a nice cup of tea at this sort of walled garden cafe, which we went to the year before. And then we carried on up the famous Blackton Bar Pass. There's an amazing viewpoint at the top where there was a bloke playing his bagpipes. And I think that was the most Scottish I've ever felt, because you can see all the different islands on the Isle of Skye and some of the ones that are further out. Absolutely stunning. And it was a clear day as well, which it wasn't the first time we went up. So it was great to see that view. That's where we took our heroic, slightly awkward looking picture. And then we head down the pass, through the hairpin turns. Now this road does look scary, but I can confirm that it's not as bad as Hard Knot Pass in the Lake District. So if you've done that, you can do this easy with your eyes closed. So I'd say it's the second scariest road in the UK, not the first. No way. Anyway, we carry on and we aim for the Isle of Skye. Now, I would have loved to spend like a week exploring the Isle of Skye, but we were running out of petrol money. We had jobs to get back to, and also, a warm bed would be nice. So we just drove to this co-op petrol station on the Isle of Skye, went over a really cool bridge, which I filmed, and then we went back across, pressed on towards Fort Augustus. Again, this is another one of my favourite roads, which also isn't on the NC500. I think the NC500 would go if I switch it to the map, to the driving view. Basically, the NC500 will continue back up this road here, and then downwards towards Inverness. But if you do that, you're missing out Glencoe, which is probably one of the best roads in the whole of Scotland. So that's why I propose a different route. Although it did turn out to be more like the NC700 or something, but it's definitely worth doing this route as opposed to the normal route, which would have you start and finish in Inverness. So I feel bad for all the German tourists that just do that. Like, trust me, you need to go back through Glencoe. And then we passed on towards Fort Augustus. I think we got another fish and chips. And then we decided at this point we may as well make it back this night. It was sort of early to late afternoon when we were in Fort Augustus, and we could get back home in 6 hours 45 minutes, as it says there. So we powered on through Fort William. So we carried on through Glencoe, and then we ended up rejoining the motorway back in Glasgow, and we zoomed back home. There we are. I haven't doxed myself this time, so that's good. If we look at the stats, what was it? So it's 1 day, 7 hours of driving, and 1,400 miles. So there you go. That is the NC 700, whatever you want to call it. This is the route that I did on my first run. And I definitely things that I could have done better. I missed out 3 quite notable points. I think 2 of them I mentioned. So there was the Old Man of Stir and the Stacks of Dunscamby. There's also in Durness the Smoo Cave, which I should have known about really because it was in the car for all video, and that was quite cool, somewhere along the coast here. But we also missed that out. And again, we could have spent some time on the Isle of Skye, but we chose not to. But I think, although we did rush it, it also proves that if you're sort of strapped for time and you still want to do it, you can literally book 1 day off work, book your Friday off. If you set off on the Thursday after work, you can do the whole NC500, come back on, obviously very late on Sunday, and you'll have to wake up early on Monday, which will be a bit rough, but it's doable. And I'd say to anyone who's thinking of doing it, just do it. You will probably break down, but that's part of the story. Whenever a shitty situation happens, I always think, yes, this is shit, but it's going to make a good story. And when we broke down by Gairloch, it did make one hell of a story, and we met some amazing people along the way. So yeah, that concludes my NC500 route, sort of guide / story time. Don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed. So just to add at the end, since I've titled these videos, the NC500 on a budget, I thought I'd actually break down the cost of, basically all the amenities and the accommodation that we had on the trip. So obviously, to start off, accommodation cost was zero because we just camped at the side of the road. I know I haven't actually mentioned that so far in the videos because I've said campsite, but yeah, it was just, we'd park in a lay-by where there's a decent patch of grass and we'd camp there. Obviously, that's completely legal in Scotland, even if you do get rudely awoken by locals at 6 a.m. sometimes. So obviously, the other costs, it's just fuel and food, basically. So I broke down the numbers. We did 1,400 miles. I'll say 350 miles to a tank because we were driving like knobs. So if that's 4 refills at £8 each, that's £160 each on petrol. If you do it with one other person and split the cost, obviously it would be 320 quid just for yourself if you want to do it on a solo venture, which is a bit more expensive. And then I'll equate it to about £10 a day on food for 4 days each. So that's £40 each on food, 8 quid for mid-spray, and of course £15 for a crate of beer. And I came to the total of £223 each, which really is not bad at all. Obviously I should factor in the repair cost, which was 70 quid. So realistically, it was a £300 holiday. But you know what? What other holidays can you get for that much? If you go into like Magaluf or something, you're paying about £1,000 for that. So personally, I think it's a no-brainer. If you've got the time and you've got 300 quid lying around and you've got a half-decent car, I would advise you to go and do the NC500 and see if you can bring any friends along with you because it makes it cheaper and the company's always good. But yeah, once again, I hope you enjoyed.